Well, good morning, everyone. And we want to take just a special moment to welcome those of you on the parking lot today. Unusual days, to say the very least, but we all smile, we have faith in our hearts, and we choose to move through those days. And we're just glad you're out there, glad you're part of the service today. And as long as we're meeting in some of these rather unusual and creative configurations, we hope that you are with us. And by the way, happy Mother's Day to mothers that are present with us today, and they pick up this broadcast a little bit later. I extend to my lovely wife, Barbara, and I always wish my daughters, my granddaughter, my daughter-in-law now, Maddie, we wish all of them a happy Mother's Day as well. I talked to my mother yesterday. She lives just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and this August she will be 95 years young. She still lives alone. She has help that comes in about 4 times a week to make sure she's safe and she gets her household chores completed. And when I spoke with her yesterday, she said, "Oh, I wish you were here, Howard." And I said, "Well, why, Mom?" "Well, I just cooked a big rack of ribs and baked a cake." Now, you have to know my mother. She will eat very little of that. Anything that happens to be left will be frozen and consumed at another time. But most of that, as is my mother's nature and tradition, is given away. She raised 9 children, and even after we had all grown and left home, she never quite unlearned how to cook for 11 people in the home. And she doesn't cook for that many now, but she still makes these massive meals. And then the joy of the meal is sharing it with family members and friends that are nearby. That's my mother. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. And God bless you in your almost 95 years. We love you. Well, we find ourselves these days looking in 2 very distinct but yet complementary directions. On one hand, we look toward faith, our Christian faith. And we look to our faith for solace and comfort and strength. We look to our faith for answers. On the other hand, we look to an entity entirely different than our faith. We look to science, because these are times that we very prayerfully ask the Lord to guide our scientists, to guide our biotechs, as they are all looking for answers to the current problem that surrounds us. Whatever else happens in the unpredictable future, we know that there will always be advances in the world of medicine and medical intervention. History witnesses that the most significant medical advances are made during the times of war and times of disease. Unfortunately, that's when it's necessitated, and that's when some of the most arduous research is done. And of course, this is true for obvious reasons. Suddenly, doctors and surgeons, scientists and medical techs are looking for answers to the crises at hand. And of course, this is playing out at this very moment across America and throughout the world. Research studies with controlled groups go forward at this very moment. Studies that are meant to save thousands of lives. Private and government laboratories are looking for that magic bullet vaccine and new therapies for the ill. And as I said before, we very sincerely and seriously pray for their success. Biotechs like Gilead or Moderna, 23 or 24 other major biotech companies in America alone are working on a vaccine for this terrible disease even as we sit here and I speak. There is one experiment and piece of research that caught my attention last week during this COVID crisis that I find both interesting and unique. The question of the experiment is suggestive that perhaps all the answers to this crisis do not always reside in science. And here's the question: can you pray away the coronavirus? You heard it right. Can you pray away the coronavirus? The study is examining the power of prayer in those fighting for their lives from COVID-19. They are testing for supernatural intervention, according to the Kansas City Star Heart and Rhythm Institute. These folks are testing 1,000 intensive care patients that currently are inflicted with the contagion. One half of the group will get no prayer. The other half of the group will get a universal prayer, offered no less in 5 denominational forms, and the study will last 4 months. Death rates, time spent in the ICU, and ventilator usage will be the criteria, and denominational prayers will be the variables in the experiment. It seems that good folks, or the good folks that are initiating this experiment, seem to believe that there is a synergy in science and faith when they come together, something that, frankly, I've believed for a long time, and I'm quite certain many of you have as well, that there are answers both in science and there are certainly answers in the faith of our hearts. But there are, however, some problematic assumptions with the study that I just mentioned. First of all, we all know that not all prayer is equal. And I'm not referring to denominational prayer. In fact, effective prayer does not have a denominational attachment whatsoever. James said, the effectual fervent prayer of a Baptist or a Lutheran availeth much. Well, no, he didn't say that. The effectual fervent prayer of an Assemblies of God. We Spirit people, that's what gets the job done. Well, James did not say that either. He simply said, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man, a good person with a good heart, person with good faith, a person who has entrusted themselves to the Lord. This kind of person, said James, prays, and it is effective. Another aspect or consideration is that of ritual prayer versus genuine faith prayer. Now, if prayer is only offered in the name of research, these good folks in Kansas City should not expect very much. On the other hand, think about this. If they only had a way to seek out individuals whose hearts are fully given to faith, they have a daily relationship with the Lord, and they trust in the living and resurrected Christ as a real, vibrant personality, I would expect some, well, miraculous results. I really would. Honestly, the synergism of faith and prayer is the most therapeutic intervention that many people have going for them at any given time in our lives, during our problems, during our challenges. Now, it's wise to see our doctors. It is typically smart to utilize the therapies recommended, but in the end, our lives and our future rest in God. Our lives and our future rest in His faithfulness. So we need the challenge of maintaining faith and practicing prayer in the everyday laboratory of life. Paul talks to us about the attitude of prayer. He said, do not cease to pray. In the original languages, the verb is in the Greek present tense, linear, and it really means just keep on praying. Now, it doesn't mean you pray 24 hours a day. What Paul is talking about is a lifestyle of prayer. The attitude that I am going to encapsulate my life during the difficult times of my life in prayer. I will not cease to pray. I will not get discouraged. I will not quit. I will not allow anyone to talk me away from the veracity and the power of a prayerful life. Listen to what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 3, verse number 20, when he talks to us about the extent of prayer. Now to him, oh, I like this, who is able to exceedingly and abundantly do above what we ask or think, according to his power that works within us. You see, the Bible tells us that there resides within every person of faith this power, and it can be latent, it can be dormant, it can be unused, but if we release it, if we can think and we can ask, those are the two criteria Paul said. Our imagination, our thought world, and then asking, seeking. If we do those two things, we unleash within our lives and upon the lives of other people that, according to Paul, can accomplish things exceedingly and abundantly beyond anything we can imagine. Paul also said in Philippians, as he talked about the scope of prayer, in everything, by prayer, general prayer, and supplication, which seems to be a prayer with some amount of specificity to it, in everything, in every situation, in every trial, in every formidable circumstance, by prayer and supplication, along with the attitude of thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. That aspect of vocalizing, that aspect of verbalizing your prayer, that aspect of saying, God, this is the way it is. This is my situation. This is how I feel. I want to pray for others. I need to pray for myself. There are family members. And I'm coming to you in everything, in prayer and supplication, with an attitude of thanksgiving to make my request known to you. So we understand that there is this synergism of our faith, our imagination, our trust, and our prayer that comes together so that we have this experience that Jude talked about when he said, building yourselves up on your utmost holy faith. Get this, praying in the Holy Spirit. Prayer that is, I like to use the word unctionized. That means to be energized. Prayer that is energized and given fervency and alacrity through the sincerity of our hearts. The bottom line is this. Prayer must always be the most important activity of our lives. So keep your prayer life founded upon that which outlasts this vicious storm in which we currently find ourselves. And then I'd like to say also to somehow encourage you to manage a proper perspective in faith as well. Keep a proper perspective on faith itself. Not just the act of prayer, but the faith that makes the prayer efficacious. Too often, we treat faith like a tool or a magic bullet against the enemy. But understand, faith is not so much something we have or do not have, or not so much a virtue that we could lose and regain again. Faith is something that goes deeper and finds expression in our very fundamental and essential selves. I like to say it this way. We are a people of faith. We live faith. We breathe faith. Faith is a part of the heartbeat of our lives. I think Paul was thinking along these lines when he said that we walk by faith and not by sight. Our lives are not controlled by the things around us and by the threats that come against us. Our lives are controlled by faith. We walk by faith. Paul meant by that we develop a lifestyle, a daily attitude, the manner in which we carry out our daily experiences. We do it by faith. We don't simply pray in faith and use faith and go away. We live faith. Because faith is a holistic expression of what our Christian lives are all about. We must learn to live in the arena of faith. Faith and trust in God become a part, an integral part of our daily lives. The practice of daily offering up our relationships. Think about it. Our marriages, our work, our worship, our families, our church life, and yes, even our recreation. These can become various aspects of our lives that are offered to God in faith. These things are received by faith. All the things that I mentioned, they are received by faith as gifts from God into our human experience, and they should be returned in a faith life, a daily faith life, as offerings to God. Everything we are about is about faith. Comes through faith, it is given back to God in faith. This is how faith works. Our faith becomes a predisposition of life expressions of every kind. Someone said to an ill and aging lady in failing health, "Sister, you need faith more than ever at this point in your life." The frail little lady answered, "I've had faith all of my life. I have walked down my country lane in faith. I have planted gardens and harvested crops in faith. I raised my children, and I lived with my dear husband in faith. Please don't tell me I need something that has filled and guided every day of my life." Well, you know what? I like her attitude. I like her philosophy. Faith is not just something we have, it's something we are. It's not something we call upon in a time of crises like the one we're going through universally at this time. Faith is who we are. We live by faith and not by sight. We understand that whatsoever is not of faith, Paul said, is sin. In other words, faith is the disposition of who we are. Whether it's the practical things of how we live our lives, or the theological things upon which we base our faith, or the philosophical things by which we determine our values and our relationships with one another. It's all about faith. If we isolate faith only to our prayers, we weaken our prayers and we cheapen faith. A double compromise of a true biblical expression of life. On the other hand, the person who allows faith and trust and obedience to God to enter life on every level has strengthened faith and consequently emboldened their prayers when prayer is as crucial to life as it is in this very moment. Think about faith in its quintessential terms. The writer of Hebrews said it this way: "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen." Faith effectively works within our lives as two expressions, substance and evidence. The writer of Hebrews says faith is substance. A Greek term, hypostasis, that literally means something put beneath for the purpose of being a foundation. Faith is substance. It is foundation to our lives. And from this dependable foundation comes hope and expectation. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Faith informs both mind and emotion with this sense of certitude, not fear, but hope and certitude. When faithfully carrying out his call as an apostle to preach, Paul said, with absolute certainty concerning the foundation of his life, for I know whom I have believed. That's faith's center. I know whom I have believed, Jesus Christ, and am persuaded, faith's conviction or faith's certainty, and he is able to keep that which I've committed, the commitment of faith, against that day. Faith's hope, that no matter what the day brings, and we're not sure what day Paul may have been talking about when he said against that day. Was he talking about the day of the Lord? Or was he talking about the day that a problem or a challenge came like a freight train in his direction? Well, we don't know, but here's what we can understand, that faith will work on any day and prepare us for that day. That is the substance of things hoped for. And I want to tell you that Paul possessed the identical faith that you and I possess. His faith was not qualitatively different than ours. It was a simple trust in the Lord. Nothing has changed about the essence or the quality of Christian faith and the ability of any Christian to commit to God through a foundational faith experience all the episodes of life that may come his or her way. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. And then finally, faith is the evidence of things not seen. Evidence is a legal term that applies both to the written charge that brings a conviction to the court, but it's also the manifestation of the proof of that charge. So you have an attorney that says, here is the charge of the evidence. Here's the evidence. And he or she would be talking about the written evidence. But the trial is when the real evidence comes to bear. So that evidence is twofold. It's what is written as evidence, but ultimately it's what is proven as evidence. You see, faith is our evidence that what God has said is true, and not only because we read the Bible and we have the statement of that evidence, but we take it with us into the courtroom of life and we prove it to be true. Faith is the evidence that proves the veracity and the truthfulness of God's claim in life. Faith is that evidence that everything God has said is true and will ultimately be proven true in our lives, although some of those things may not be seen in the moment, because it's the evidence of things not yet seen. But the court of life and the experience of your life will prove it. So go forward, my friend. Stay faithful with the writer of Hebrews, who said, for he that comes to God that must believe that he is, and he's the rewarder of those that diligently seek him. You may have the passive element of faith. Keep the active element of diligently seeking him, that will reward you and strengthen you and answer your prayers during these very difficult hours. May God's peace be with you today. And remember, there's no challenge, there's no mountain, there's no valley too deep, but what faith and prayer and diligently seeking God will bring you to the other side. May God's peace, may his blessing go with you. Amen.
Thank you, friends, for joining us.